According to a report published by the Ethical Journalism Network, journalists who report on the global migration and refugee crisis often fail to tell the full stories and routinely fall into propaganda traps led by politicians. Aidan White, the director of EJN, said, "Around the world, media coverage is often politically led, with journalists following an agenda dominated by loose language and talk of invasion and swarms."
Hungary has been overwhelmed by the flood of migrants.
As you've got a swarm of people coming across the Mediterranean.
Now the same thing is happening in Europe. Countries are being overrun by migrants, mostly Muslims.
Those are reportedly Muslim refugees on a train in Europe chanting Allah Akbar or God is great. Now, to be clear, we're not saying that any of those people are terrorists or in any way affiliated with a terror group, but it does highlight just how many of these refugees who are fleeing violence in Iraq and Syria are Muslim.
But from a point of view of our national security, I think we have to be very careful. We know that Islamic State is infiltrating some of the people who are coming across on the boats.
Take a look at what's happening in Germany. Take a look at Belgium. You ever go to Belgium, Brussels? I mean, one of the most beautiful places in the world. Now it's living in hell.
A report by the Migration Observatory at the University of Oxford, after assessing 58,000 news stories, found that the portrayal of immigrants and refugees in the UK news is largely negative, with the term illegal most commonly used to describe immigrants. Statistics drawn by a report done by Article 19 suggest that 31% of headline and 53% of text about asylum across all newspapers has negative connotations. Language used to describe immigration is highly hostile across all newspaper types. In addition to misreporting, there is also overreporting. A recent published book, Bad News for Refugees, looks specifically at how refugee and asylum seekers has been stigmatized in political rhetoric and media coverage.
Attacks on refugees and on migrants go back a long way. That these are, in a sense, old favourites of a right-wing media, and that they will be used and reinvigorated and grasped again by politicians as they are necessary in the political process.
If you look at a lot of the people that I've been watching on television, it's men. There aren't that many women, relatively speaking.
Author also talks about how the media has an impact on public thought about refugees.
That when you go out to the focus groups and you start to ask people about what they understand about the world, people string together explanations which are really composed of tabloid headlines.
Much of its negative and focus on number of migrants on the move took a dramatic turn sums up the challenge facing media. And it's not just a lack of humanity on the news agenda, or matter of luck, or matter of caring more about some people at expense of others. Up to the we need a broader lens to see migration and refugee stories. However, on the other hand, unlikely they are portrayed in central section of the media or by some politicians. The film and documentary portrays them as inspirational figures offering a message of hope. Various film festivals start to raise attention of cinema about refugees and immigrants. For example, Refugee Voice in the film is held on the 18th of May this year at the Palace Festival in Cannes.
There have been hundreds and hundreds of hours of television news footage about the refugee crisis, but what we're seeing in Cannes is new ways of telling refugee stories, exploiting the full range of media platforms. Mahmoud is a refugee from Aleppo in Syria. He built up a massive internet following by charting his journey from Turkey to Greece and ultimately to Sweden. He uses comedy to tackle stereotypes about refugees.
The BBC documentary Exodus is documented through use of mobile footage. Viewers saw the reality of dangerous journey and were powerfully connected with refugees. by using footage shot by refugees like Hassan Akkad as they document their own journey. This documentary helped to connect viewers with individual stories. The filmmaker Hassan Akkad hopes the exercise will prove worthwhile if the film helps to educate viewers about the crisis. He said, "When you watch the news and see the movement of millions of people, you don't identify with any of them. I wanted to humanize the story. I want people to understand what made us live and what happened to us on the journey." Moreover, feature films also raise awareness for refugee crisis. One of the well-known feature films deal with immigrants and refugees is the French film Welcome. The director, Philippe Luchet, said in his interview, "The theme of my film is immigrants, but its subject is a drama between two couples. I wanted to explore the theme through the real life of people, those like you or me, who don't know much about the problems of undocumented refugees and how one confronted with this issue." The film also deals with the L6221 law in France, that if you help illegal migrants, you can be jailed for 5 years. When the film was released, the opposition Socialist Party asked the director, Philippe Luchet, to screen the film in the French parliament because they wanted to modify this legislation. But their effort to change the law failed because Sarkozy has a majority. The film was then screened at the European Parliament and won its Lux Prize, which was a political message that this law is unfair and should be changed.
I was very moved and touched by this film because I think it's a very good combination on political problems, especially migration problems, and what is the current state of play with all the laws in France against these refugees.
This law had to be amended so that only those dealing with illegal immigrants for profit-making purposes would be liable to 5 years imprisonment. This would affect traffickers and their networks and not ordinary citizens who would have been convicted for being compassionate, which is absolutely appalling.
The director believes the response to the film does represent a shift in political thinking. Manchester filmmaker also portrayed Kayla refugee crisis.
We wanted to really, I think, kind of approach this and humanize the story. So you no longer saw these people as figures and numbers. You saw them as individuals and really kind of had an empathy with the stuff that they were going through. To come from a war-torn country and then all of a sudden have all of your rights taken away from you and be trapped in living conditions which really I didn't think that I would see in my lifetime in Europe is quite shocking. I think it's going to be something that we'll look back on with great shame if we don't do something about it.